With us today is Zach and Water, and they are going to introduce themselves very shortly. And I am the hostess for this show today. And today we're going to talk about Hannah's miracle, fertility after menopause, the role of ovarian rejuvenation in the longevity movement. And we have two experts here to talk about this today. But before I'm going to turn the mic to them to introduce themselves, we want to also invite you to a very special event this August, from August 23rd to the 24th. The world's renowned longevity scientists all going together in Johannesburg, the first time at the cradle of humankind, the beginning of life for this earth, to cause the movement for Afro longevity. And this is the first time this kind of conference is held on the continent of Africa. So we really want to see you there. At that meeting, you'll be able to mingle with uh, the pinnacles of the longevity science representative in that conference. So please join us. And you can find and register the event at the taffds.org. Just so you know, TAFFDS stands for Trans-Agro for Future Discussions, and it was founded by Osina Kachi, and he and his philosophy friends founded this organization in order for us to not just understanding the history, our past, and living the present, but also project into the future with the brightest possible vision. So now I'm going to turn the mic to Zach, and he's going to introduce himself, and then after that will be Water. Please go ahead, Zach. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Eileen. Thank you very much. My name is Zach Vakaris. I'm the Scientific Director of Austin Biotech. We specialize in fully functioning reproductive organs for a basis of a fully extended life for Freudenspannner. And we have started off with our phase 1, taking ovarian rejuvenation as a way to reversing menopause in women in a way to extend their quality of life in very brief nutshell. So in the sense that the average person who's under the age of 60 and under will live probably to 100 years, 110 years, notwithstanding any bad accidents or anything like that. And what we've discovered is that the average woman goes through menopause between 45 and 55. So they're going to spend half their biological life and the bulk of their adult life in accelerated aging, because it's shown that studies show very clearly the later you go through menopause, the longer you live. It's just a fact. So we looked at that, and we looked at it in a very identifiable way for us to be able to make that happen, and that's what we've done. We've had the first phase go through last year, which was pretty successful, and now we're on to the second phase, and we've expanded into the concept of Freudenspannner, as well as some other areas about aesthetic maintenance and so on and so forth. So that's me in a nutshell, and the team as well. I can introduce the rest if you wanted, but over to Walter.
Thank you. Water, please.
Thank you. I think of myself as a longevity activist first and foremost, and of course that doesn't mean living forever in a test tube, but rather as a vibrant, healthy, happy person that is contributing to society. And as Zach has said, Zach and I met some time ago in another organization that was also working on fertility enhancement. And then, since then we've become close friends, and I'm really happy to be here with him today. I've invested, in my activism has turned into investment and volunteer work. And also I've been a lab rat for two very important clinical trials, one called the TRIM trial to regrow the thymus, and another one, a plasma replacement therapy that is very current. And that's, I suppose, enough for now.
Wow, that sounds so interesting. I want to now get to a more personal aspect of the research, what inspired you, Zach? What inspired you to study this topic? And then also, why is it important?
Well, when you mean inspire me, are you talking about inspiring me to get involved in ovarian rejuvenation or to get involved in longevity?
I think they are more or less related, but obviously these topics have you jump off the bed every morning and dedicate over time to the research of this subject, and also really pioneering the field. So why is that important to you? Why do you think that's important to the world?
Well, I think I can't speak for the world, but I'll speak for myself. So my grandfather, who was a very important person in my life, very inspirational in many ways, died suddenly at the age of 76. Now, from my family, we're from a bunch of long livers. We're actually from the blue zones in Greece, actually. So we're pretty long living by genetic ways. And it was a shock to the system. And it was a shock to me, for sure, because no one saw it coming. And it really made me question the fragility of life and also the purpose of why people die at certain ages. And things came out after his death that made me realize that there was things that, although he looked robust on the outside, inside there were areas that he had very bad things happen, and so he died young because of that. And that sort of really drove me into to progressing more into the molecular biology. I just started college when that happened, so that really drove me into that, as well as the sort of aspects of research in terms of why people die when they die. And it wasn't so much about clinging on for life, but it's more about making the best of what you have. That was the first thing. But that idea sort of sat there and ruminated for quite some time. And then over a few years of research and going into different areas, I went into a totally different area of science for a period of time, but accidentally coming back to the rejuvenating properties or sort of life extending properties of certain chemicals. I kept coming back into the research I was doing, working on a biofuel project. And as a byproduct, I created these anti-aging chemicals, which are something to do, I think, with your thymus stuff, Walter, that you were talking about. But it's ironic that these things kept coming back. So the signs kept coming back and back and back. And when my daughter was born, sort of by total surprise and pleasant surprise, that sort of spurred me to look into why issues of fertility keep you young. They always say your kids keep you young. Why do they keep you young? Because they're financial sinkholes and they drain you of all these other things. So what is it about them that keeps you young? And when I was looking into it, I found that actually the bio pathways, the biophysical pathways of our organisms are actually designed for obviously reproducing, and that reproduction keeps you youthful. And specifically with women, there's a very clear rate determining step, which is the menopause. And menopause only happens in a few species. And looking at humans, I was like, well, why do we have this? I mean, it's almost like, doesn't make sense. Why can men have children at 60 or 70 or 80 or 90, and women can stop having children at as early as 30 or 35? It didn't quite add up. So when I looked into it, we found that with a one sort of protocol, one bang for our buck kind of thing, we could actually extend the quality of life for women. And so in terms of what that is, I mean, that was obviously a personal driving thing because most of my family are women. I'm surrounded by sort of high achieving women who have done lots of things. And so it sort of seemed a little bit unfair in a way. And also the other thing is that as we're living longer, the fact is that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years old was the average lifespan. Well, now, living to 80 is not unusual, and living to 100 is not going to be that unusual very soon. So wouldn't you want the people that are running the world, and a lot of women are running the world, specifically now, to be the best they can be. And that's basically how it came about, through a combination of personal experience and also just being the right person at the right place with the right experience at the right time. So I wouldn't say there was a grand plan. It was more sort of I fell into it.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And that's I'm gonna switch the mic to Water a bit. And how did you meet up with Zach? And what's your journey with him? And what did you guys discover together?
Well, as I said before, Zach and I first connected in another now defunct company called Innovium, and we became, friends and associates through that, and then it just progressed from there, one thing at a time. And as it turns out, and indeed, I'll do a little plug for the Johannesburg conference in August. I will be making a presentation on my angle of longevity, which is closely related to what Zach is talking with, which is uh, I have discovered, it's really not a new discovery, but just kind of an amplified discovery that you can dramatically improve the outcomes of pregnancy and the developmental phase of life through a variety of, actually a very large variety of accessible, inexpensive interventions. And it's probably the single most cost effective way to extend life and improve the quality of life, both of those things. So, that's one thing that, and I've developed that a lot since I've, based on my conversations with Zach, and and also became more conscious of how central the reproductive organs are to, as he says, as a foundation upon which longevity um, depends. So, what was your other question?
What have you discovered together?
Oh, okay. What have we discovered together?
How to make a good salad dressing.
Yeah. We've eaten a lot of meals. We've eaten a lot of meals together, and we have a slight, conflict. But boy, we can make good salads.
And I have to say, I think many audience are curious. What's they all have the same question, and they're too shy to ask. How do you look as young as you are? So, what is the secret ingredients in your salad?
Salad. Well, I won't understate the importance of greens and fresh vegetables in particular. Uh, you so much of what you like to eat is actually a matter of habit and customs, and you can change what you like by simply forcing it a little bit. So you say, if you find out that arugula is good for you, at first it tastes strange, and then after a while, suddenly you find yourself looking for arugula when it isn't in the store because you like it. It just so anyway, you need to condition yourself to eat the right foods. Um, right now I'm 70 years old and I've got a little bit of pre-diabetes, and of course, like so many people, I love sweet things, but they're bad for me. So I'm more and more they're being pushed out of my diet with some reluctance, but it's necessary. But I really need to come back to one thing, which is super important. Everybody should recognize that good exercise is probably the single best thing you can do if you're otherwise living a good lifestyle to extend your health and even your appearance.
I guess I don't want to like go too far from the subject, but I do.
Right.
When you say good exercise, what does that mean to everybody?
Well, I mean, I think. Can I just ask? Can I just say one thing though? The other
Yes,
thing,
please.
the most important thing in the salad is being a Greek. I'm going to just say it is olive oil. olive oil is just phenomenal, and what it does, and it is. I mean, he was shocked how much olive oil I go through, and it's sort of, but
Wait, but you have a different oil though. Yesterday we had a long discussion in a super ingredient that you discover in Africa, and that's even Trump olive oil. Am I correct? Or
yeah, I mean, it is. Well, part of what we use in our procedures is we get people fertility fit. And what we mean by that is, if you're running a marathon, you've got to train for stamina. If you're running 100 meters, you train for explosive power. If you're running for fertility, you want to get fertility fit, which is having your systems running smoothly. And when we looked at that, we thought it was all about supplements, and we've discovered that it's actually mostly about diet and exercise, plus the little special ingredient of the emotions, which we can come to in a second. But the diet side, diet's a very interesting thing, because diet, if you have a bad diet, it is extremely bad for you. But if you have a good diet, it just sort of, you break even. It's not quite, it doesn't really boost you up hugely. It just makes sure that you don't sink really, really low. And being olive oil, I was like, olive oil is the best, and it is the best for pound for everything. It has the highest levels of oleic acid, which are antimicrobial. They are very good for keeping the skin healthy, very good for gut lubrication, etc., etc., etc. But I have a colleague of mine, a friend of mine. She's from Namibia, and she introduced me to something called marula oil. And I was like, okay, I'll just have a look at it. So I tried it out, and it's used all over Southern Africa. The best stuff is grown in Ovamboland in Namibia, which is where she's from. There's some good stuff in South Africa as well. I've got to be careful, because obviously there might be issues about which one's better here. But from what I've studied so far, the best stuff comes from Namibia, and it's in Mozambique, the whole of Southern Africa, sort of south of the DRC kind of thing. But what's interesting about it is has the same properties of olive oil without the foul smell of olive oil. Olive oil does smell a bit rough, and it also is much lighter, and so it works very well. And we've actually incorporated that into our procedures and our protocols, because one of the things that we found was that we could actually reverse menopause in some women with just diet, exercise, supplements, and mental health training, for want of a better term, which takes a bit of time. But we found that diet was a huge basis. And the other thing that we found was, within our candidates of the first group, with 211, we had 4 or 5 who were native to West Africa. One was from Mozambique, but most of them from West Africa, so the Nigeria, Burkina Faso area. And because of their diet, from a young age, they did not have a lot of the fertility issues that were associated with women of similar socioeconomic standing in the United States that we were working with. And it was quite shocking, because, and this is where I think Walter comes in with his field protocols, which is because they had good, healthy living from a young age, even though they were having aging issues, they were in much better position to cope with that with a little bit of tweaking. And we discovered from that things like marula oil, salad dressings, and it depends on your person and the person themselves, because not everyone's the same. One size does not fit all. A few sizes will fit 99.999% of the population. And we had an interesting dynamic whereby, with the right diet, on working with the right blood groups, the right exercise routines, we actually had great abilities to rejuvenate these women. And also some of their husbands or partners who were doing the procedures were also working with them as well. And they were finding that was working for them too. But obviously, marula oil is great because it has the properties. I call it like the African olive oil, although I know olive oil is grown in Africa. It's a big place, but it has the properties with the high monounsaturated fats, omega-9s, which is oleic acid. It has alpha-linoleic omega-3s. It also has great non-saponifiable properties as well, which are antimicrobial, rejuvenative properties for skin and for internally into the organs. And you hear a lot of doctors talking about the benefits of olive oil, but marula just doesn't. It just is light. It's very fluffy. It's wonderful stuff, and I'm a big fan of it. And I even love it in my salad dressings. So yeah.
Yeah, but you can't exactly go to the local grocery store and expect to see it on the shelves yet. It's kind of emerging.
Yeah, you can't yet. I mean, this is, but you will soon. I mean, it sort of, it makes coconut oil and argan oil and all those other oils. It's just pale. They're just nothing comparatively. They really are. And it's even just statistically, but it's starting to happen. They're starting to come out, but that's really more through the people that I know in Namibia who are bringing it over to the Western world. But in South Africa, a lot of people will know about it. And one of the things that you were talking about with your viewers is you want to talk about interventions and protocols that can be achieved with minimal scientific overhead. And we're very big in the West of having all these medicines and pills because basically we're trying to study something so we can make some cash. But really what we're talking about here is so many of these protocols with good habits, as Walter calls it. I say you make a virtue out of a necessity. So you have to eat, so learn how to cook. You have to exercise, so learn, have a lifestyle whereby the exercise is part of your life, so it's fun, it's not a chore. And so you have the knock-on effect of making yourself feel good. And what we discovered is that these sort of protocols, if applied properly, visibly change your emotional constructs in your body and visibly will actually change biophysiological pathways in your body to the point of increased levels of testosterone, decreased cortisol, whatever, stuff like that. Measuring them is not so easy, but we're working on that.
Well, you bring up an important point that emotions are not over here in a separate category completely. No. Of course, if you're being, I don't know, beaten, I suppose it doesn't matter what you're eating. It's not going to feel very good. But within the range of normal life, by proper diet and exercise in itself can significantly enhance to your feeling of well-being. And that in turn is somewhat self-fulfilling because when you are in a bad emotional state, you actually generate some adverse chemicals in your body.
Yeah, very true. I mean, we looked at it very much when we do the procedure. I mean, we quantify it that what we do is we quantify it as the importance of emotions on a full and productive life. So it's defined as the effect emotions have on biological markers of aging to either shorten or lengthen your life. And there's a clear distinction here. So, for instance, we approach the markers of inflammation that happen from excessive hormonal imbalances in related stress-related situations. So, cortisol is a hormone that is produced under stress, but stress is a perception matter. So, what happens is you get cortisol, adrenaline, insulin production that occurs from psychological situations of stress, or they come from emotional senses of wanting a dopamine fix. So like you comfort eat, and so you have insulin resistance. And what happens is these leads to physical reactions of inflammation, increased body temperature, and water retention. And what that does is it puts stress on the body itself to maintain its sort of balance and get rid of the dead stuff, or as they call it in the science world, senescence, the senescent cells, the dead cells, the pruning of the undergrowth in the garden, getting rid of all the dead weeds so the plants can grow through. So if you have a way of minimizing that, you're actually allowing your body to free itself up into ways of maintaining itself. The body has a very strong way of regulating itself. And the thing about functioning reproductive organs is that with one swipe of the stroke of the pen, you are cleaning up a lot of these issues that create aging. So we talk about things like, oh well, your metabolism slows down as you get older. No, it doesn't. It slows down at the age of 1, which Walter will tell you about with his fill-in interventions. And from the age of 1 to around about 80, it stays the same. And then after that, it decreases by about 1% a year. So even at the age of 100, your metabolism slowed down by 20%, maximum. That's assuming no interventions, no protocols to improve that metabolism. So why is it then that you have a bunch of 30, 40-something-year-old people who are severely overweight, who have massive issues with their diet, with their energy levels, with their libido, with their mental acuity? And they have them because of other factors externally that have knock-on effects on their systems. And so a lot of aging protocols, they look at things like, how do you fix Alzheimer's? How do you improve the synapse speed of your nerve to fast twitch your muscle so you can run 100 meters as fast as Usain Bolt? It's very specialized. And it's very much about, hey, let's build the fastest sports car, Formula One car we can. Well, it's amazing, but it only rides on a track. Well, life isn't a racetrack. Life is lots of different roads. And to have a variety, a utilitarian product that manages speed and manages your physical strength, that is what's important. So when you look at us from an organism point of view, we are built to go forth and multiply, as Hannah gave her child to God, right? We go forth and multiply. Okay, great. So we're designed to have children. Fantastic. So what do we need for those things? Well, as men, we develop broad shoulders, strong muscles, the ability to go and find the mate. We also have the strength to protect the tribe. And then as women, they develop higher pain ratios, improved sort of communication abilities. Women are, men might be strong, but women are definitely better linguists, on average. And then they also have denser bones, more supple skin, the ability to carry a child. So all of these things are designed for us. So if we can teach the body to recreate that internally, by definition, we're going to have people that are in what we would call the prime of their life. I'm not saying they'll all look 20 years old, but they'll be and a prime isn't 20. Prime is a whole range from maybe 18 to 50, I don't know, 18 to 60, depends on how you want to look at it. But there is a prime that we have, and that is what we're looking to find. And we chose fertility or fertility organs because that was the best hit we could do with one stroke of the pipette.
Thank you so much. That was so insightful, and then also that answers a lot of the questions now. But I want to pull us back a little bit because I think the audience need to know the results from the study, and also what kind of protocol in general. It sounded to me that you have integrated lifestyle as well as emotional, I should say psychological management, and then also a diet and perhaps some exercise. So what kind of protocol do you employ to generate the results that you had?
Great question. Again, everyone always sort of, when they're in these situations, says, we had a grand master plan and we knew what we were doing all along. Well, that's not true. It wasn't the case at all. What it was that we were looking at improving reversing menopause so that we could reignite the menstrual cycle so that people could have children. So we were talking about the initial clinical trial that we were involved in, which was PRP, which some of our audience might know as vampire facials, which is a blood product. You take it out of the blood, you centrifuge it down, and you re-inject it into parts of the body. But blood doesn't have that much genetic material in it. So what we did is we decided to take a stronger genetic material, which is mesenchymal stem cells, which come from bone marrow. Now, bone marrow is all over your body, right from your fingertips here, all the way through to your hips. Most people think that the best stuff comes from your thigh bone. Well, it doesn't. The best stuff comes from the top of your hip bone. It's the strongest. So we take that out. We concentrate it. We also know how to filter the best stuff out. So we know to take the best bits, like the best cuts of the meat kind of thing. and then we put that back into certain organs in certain ways, and that rejuvenates those organs because those stem cells will differentiate into the cells surrounding them. So if it's an ovary, it will rejuvenate into an egg, an ova. Without getting really technical and going into lots of details, we use a form of biological chewing gum that is used, and that attaches the stem cell to the ovary, and then it produces sort of rejuvenating properties. That was our plan all along. So we've done the first stem cell clinical trial in 2018. Very quickly realized that it did not have the power, the punching power that we needed. So we immediately went into exotherapy in 2019, and then we were ready to go. We were literally everything ready to go.
I'm sorry, we need to know what exotherapy is, please. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Exotherapy is the protocol, the name of the protocol that we use for rejuvenating ovaries. That's the name of it. So it uses exosomes with mesenchymal stem cells injected into parts of the reproductive organs to rejuvenate those organs.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
So we discovered in 2020, because we were ready to go, January 2020. So what we were going to do is just get a whole load of people, candidates, into this clinical trial. And of course, in March 2020, we had the lockdown. So we had 30 or 40 people ready to go, and there's nothing we could do about it. And we didn't know what to do because they were very emotional. And so we thought, well, we better just at least, why don't we get them fit? So, okay, so you need to lose a bit of weight. Okay, let's look at how can we get you more healthy? How can we look at what your mental state is? And one of our candidates, who was in her early 60s, was 5 years menopausal, actually started to menstruate again just with diet, exercise, and supplements. But she also happens to be a psychologist, and she had an amazing stress management system. And from that, we looked at ways of applying these techniques. We realized we'd stumbled onto something we hadn't realized, which is really obvious when you think about it. Oh, yeah, you get fit. If you want to exercise, you want to go and train for the military, you go and do exercises for the military. It makes perfect sense. So we then started to hone down onto this. And we thought, again, it was going to be supplements. Actually, supplements are a very, very small part of it. The best thing is really about diet and exercise. And then the real thing is about the emotional aspects of it and how you can use emotion. Emotions are almost like the signaling systems for the body, and that you can control those emotions and apply that. But to measure those markers are very difficult. So we kept it very simple and kept it to one or two very key areas, which was the cortisol levels. But you know that cortisol creates inflammation. Inflammation is the age accelerator, as we call it. Inflammation is the age accelerator, without a doubt. That's why you have athletes who plunge into pools when they're after they've done exercise to keep their muscles tense and stuff like that.
By the way, Zach, well, I could try to do it, but I think you'll do it better. Probably most people listening to this don't know what an exosome is. So why don't you give a quick lowdown on that?
Right. Okay. An exosome is it's a little piece of genetic material that comes off the DNA. It's like a sort of an engram, a piece of genetic material that is a signaling system for biochemical pathways in the body. And it just depends on where you apply them. There are different types of exosomes, some that come from blood, some that come from stem cells, some that come from abdominal fat tissue, and they have different qualities. So, for instance, you can't use stem cells from exosomes from bone marrow with other products, because they won't work. So think of it like flavoring in a dish. It's salt or pepper of the dish. If that makes sense.
Oh, thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you, Walter, for asking that question. I wanted to ask that question, but then I felt like I don't want to distract.
Well, if I
interrupt me. I go on too long, please.
If I got it right, basically the exosomes are created by individual cells, and they're kind of membrane bound, well, chemicals really,
Yes.
that are issued by the cells, and it basically allows things to be transported by the blood or other fluids
Yes. But
to around the body to
yes.
other
Yes, but they
places.
also act as a form of biological chewing gum. So
Yes.
they stick things together. So the principles that apply for splicing plants, where you take a piece of plant and you stick it to another one and you wrap it around, actually works with humans. It works with cells. We complicate. We call it senescence. Well, it's just death. We call it inflammation. No, that's calling it unrestricted growth. There's all these. We have fancy names for very simple concepts. Scientists love doing that. They like to confuse it. It makes them feel better, I think.
Okay, so now before I ask the question about whether it's real that we can reverse aging and menopause and so on and so forth, I'm going to actually turn the mic to Water, which is a biomedical engineer in his background. And I'm going to ask Water, you mentioned about the importance of quality of incubation of, infancy development and how that is tied to longevity. Could you expand that a bit, please? Thank you.
Yes, it's actually it's an interesting story that I think is worth telling, because it shows how everybody can find ways to contribute if they start digging in. So, as it turns out, I read this paper, and it was a study of blood exchange and stuff like that on rats. Um, and and in this particular case, they included, normally you would have treated old rats, untreated old rats, the controls, and you might have untreated young rats, and you'd compare how each of their various biometric factors change based with or without the therapy, the intervention. But in this particular case, they also treated some young rats, and lo and behold, the young rats improved. So that reminded me of something that we all know, which is that evolution never delivers optimum. Never. It's always a compromise. Therefore, we can, that gives us the opportunity to improve upon what evolution has delivered to us after all these millions of years. So, for example, the birth canal is a finite size. Now, it might be that a larger baby would have a better chance of survival, but it will kill mother and baby coming out. It's certainly in ancient times. These days, things have changed, but you can go to an old graveyard and you'll see a whole lot of mothers and babies that their gravestones are right next to each other and they died on the same day. And that's because many times they just couldn't deliver the baby, and both parties died. Now, of course, we have things, cesarean section and so on to make that a lot safer. But anyway, so it turns out that many people understand that damage is a key element in so-called adverse aging, uh, and and it turns out that damage is most likely to occur as a result of metabolism or growth. Growth is dangerous. Metabolism is dangerous inherently. And guess when the highest period of growth and metabolism is? It's during the early years. Because think of it, on day one, you're one cell. A few days later, you're a dozen cells. Talk about growth. This is like multiplied yourself many times. And any of those where you have a misfold, some problem with the DNA errors or such like this will perhaps come out as a deformed arm or something like that. So insofar as we are able to prevent damage during that time, and furthermore enhance growth, this is good. So, for example, there's this one chemical, it's actually innate inside of you. Uh, 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 AKG, alpha ketoglutarate. And they found that by simply, now it's already inside of you, but what the baby receives and what the young child, what the child eats is variable. And indeed, mom can only deliver so much to the baby. And what they found, though, this is with like 120 pigs. It wasn't some tiny little study. They found that by just simply adding a little AKG to the feed of the pregnant sows, that the piglets came out 20% bigger and healthier in every measurable way. So it illustrates that we can improve upon nature, and that is the thrust of, I now call it the PHIL program, PHILL, um, uh, pre-adult health interventions for lusty longevity.
Wow, that's a
Okay,
totally
okay.
different topic, I guess.
I know, but I just
wanted
wanted to bring it up.
Huh?
we will have
What?
a different show just for this topic, right?
Right, but I
It
just
sounds
wanted to point
huge.
out that there's a lot of room for improving the outcomes of youth without without jumping through enormous hoops. I mean, we all know, for instance, about, hey, you're pregnant, maybe it's a good idea, don't get drunk every night, right? So, there's many other things beyond that that are very poorly implemented and known.
Okay, well,
Sorry, that is a little off the subject.
I'm gonna invite you back. I mean, just in the future forecast, just to develop this topic. I'm gonna turn the mic back to Zach. Zach, do you agree with what Water said about in the danger of metabolism and growth? And I just wanted the audience to also understand why we always have two speakers and their topics kind of ride on each other. This is the kind of dynamic we want, so that there is continuity in the topic. We have, it's like a casual talk, but then I think this is where you say you are in the zone where we are most creative, and this is the kind of ambience that we are trying to create. So I'm sorry, Zach, go ahead, please. And then after that, the question to you was, is it, yes or no, we can reverse aging and we can reverse menopause. But before that, go ahead. Is it dangerous to grow and metabolize? Thank you.
Right. Well, that's a great question. I don't know who asked that one, but the thing, metabolism, unrestricted metabolism or unconstrained metabolism is known by another name, and that's cancer. So in a sense, in this purest sense, so of the 6 most deadly cancers, 5 of them are related to reproductive organs, whether it be ovarian, testicular, uterine, cervical, prostate, right? So why is that? And it's because they are constantly breaking apart and coming back together again. Nerves, when you get nerve cancer, most of the nerve cancer is really about the fat cell surrounding the Schwann cell, as opposed to the actual nerve itself, because it's so differentiated, it doesn't really change. So its strength of change is also its weakness. So he's very right, Walter. And in actual fact, I've actually read his PHIL paper, and it's great. I mean, I know him, and he loves his lab rats. I mean, I used to get more into the sort of human field, but it's the thing is that it's this metabolism issue has got to be understood, and that if you start off with bad sort of setups, that can actually affect you going forward in life. I'm not saying everything's perfect. You have to have some trauma. You have to have some hormesis, as they say, something that goes wrong, because if everything's too easy, nothing works. I mean, I think there's amongst the surfing community, they say no Indonesian ever wins the world championship because the wave's always perfect and they never have this ability to ride a bad wave. It's the same sort of thing. You have to have some trials and tribulations to allow you to be able to grow and expand. So I think, but understanding that controlled metabolism, you want to give those cells the best chance. Do you really want to populate your cells right at the beginning with bad issues or with defective? I don't know.
Well, what does that mean? Like, to the audience, what does bad metabolism mean to the audience?
Okay, so bad metabolism would be if you were to promote a form of diet or intervention when you're very young, that would restrict the growth of your brain cells. So therefore, it was not very good at, for instance, ironically, if you have too much of a vegetarian diet or vegan diet with not enough fat in it, it won't be good for your brain development. You need brain development. You're better off just giving a stick of butter or just a glass of olive oil to a child to help develop their brain. Our brains are the most energy hungry, the most, they use all the resources, use the bulk of the resources of our body, and more than anything else. So by metabolizing the wrong, say, dietary requirements at a young age, you're going to create issues for that organism as it gets older. That's not to say it can't be fixed at the age of 5, 6, 7, or 8. It can, but it's a lot harder to do. For instance, one of the things we look at with Freudenspannern and the mosaic theory is that languages, for instance, if you don't learn a language before the age of about 8 or 9, a second language, it's much harder to learn languages later in life. But if you have learned, whatever the language is, it can be anything you want. It's much easier to learn the language later in life, no matter whether you're naturally talented in languages or not. And so you see that, I mean, in Europe, where, when I grew up in Europe, a load of people speak 3 or 4 languages, French, Italian, Spanish, or Polish, Ukrainian, Russian, or whatever it might be, German, whatever, except the English, you just speak English. And so then when they're later on in life, you find that those people might move to Asia, or they might move to parts of Africa, and they'll learn a language more easily because their brain was formed and metabolized and structured in such a way that allowed them to benefit from that later on in life. Now, not all things are the same. So not all functionalities are the same. So learning a language, you have to learn it young, which is why so many cultures place such a high emphasis on education at such an early age. Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule. I understand that. But as a rule, you want to just take the bulk of it there.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention, just to, when we talk about vegetarian diet, the US, 20% of the US children are actually obese. And so that is also, the other side of the coin, because obesity can later on manifest into, for example, diabetes and other, cardiovascular issues. But yeah, because we are getting to, the end of the hour.
Can I just say one thing, Eileen, about
yes, of course. Yes, of course. Please do.
Is that vegetarian obesity is not down to being non-vegetarian in the US. It's to do with sugar, but that's another thing altogether. And sugar is vegetarian, so it's not about it. That's what I'm saying. Things are never quite what they seem. That sort of what you eat when you're young is not what you eat when you're 25, and not when you eat when you're 65. You change your dietary habits. Doesn't mean that you don't eat those things. You have to understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you.
Thank you so much for the correction. I really appreciate that. But
if I may just make a quick comment about metabolism.
Yes, please.
One of the key elements, a key problem, is that metabolism inevitably involves the creation of reactive oxygen species. And these in turn create other diseases, or they cause you to break down in other ways. So this is kind of like the incomplete burning of fuel, if you will. So then you have these reactive oxygen species that go attach themselves to a protein or something like that, and that ruins the protein. So in a very healthy system, your body will take care of those reactive oxygen species, and they won't cause any problems. Likewise, with the manufactured proteins or the creation of new cells and so on, those are risky processes, are very complicated, and things can go wrong. So that's how they can generate diseases. Just
so what you're saying is, like, to make it a little bit more understandable to the audience, extra fats combined with extra protein can cause inflammation as well as basically plaque along the blood vessel, and that is basically a recipe for, disaster for, from a standpoint of disease states. Am I correct, or do you want to modify that statement?
I'd modify that slightly. Not all fats are created equal. In fact, in actual fact, no. I would actually say that you want to have a high fat diet, but also with protein. But it varies at what stage in your life you eat those things. So you want to have one thing I will say is that you don't want to be pushing yourself with lots of carbohydrates and sugars. But that's, again, we're going off topic now because that's going to go.
Yeah, it's just a little bit off topic,
Yeah.
but I'm glad that we mentioned that, so that the reason we kept, the thing is we want our audience to go home with something that they can actually apply to their life, to make it to have a healthier future. That's why I kind of kept coming back. But
well,
it's okay.
if they want to, Eileen, we can put some links in afterwards, and if they want to ask questions, we can respond to some of those.
Yes, we are trying to. I hope Victor. I just want to give credit to Victor as well as Osioma. They are the one. They are our back engine, and they're monitoring our social media channel and helping us to, gather the questions from the audience. So, but okay. So while we are waiting for the questions to come through, question, Zach. I guess Zach, Water already asked Zach a few questions. Zach, do you have a question for Water?
This is a family channel, right?
Yes, family channel.
Actually, Walter, I have got a question for you. I've never asked you. When you did your thymus, well, two actually. One is your thymus rejuvenation with regard to the stuff you did with Fahy, right? Which was interesting. How effective was it? And do you think now that with what you've learned with the Phil interventions, and I'm sure a lot of your Phil interventions were based on the way he did the thymus protocol of adding one thing onto another, do you think you could improve what Fahy's done, or give him some insights of a phase 2 that would be better?
Oh, before you answer that question, please explain what thymus is to some of the audience. Thank you.
I'll let Walter do that.
Okay. All this stuff is so complicated and so rich. We could be talking into the wee hours and still not finish. It's kind of like, why are we here or something like that. But basically, the thymus is kind of you could think of it as like let's just say it's a critical part of your immune system, and it's much bigger when you're young. And as you get to my age, it's it's kind of down to a few thymus cells mixed in with a bunch of fat cells, and the thymus, most people have heard of a T cell. It's part of one of your immune, one of your, I guess it's called a leukocyte, right? Is that right? Yeah. And then it's very important in finding the bad guys and taking them out. So early in life, I think of ourselves in a tribal world where you don't travel a lot and so on. I mean, not outside of 100 miles anyway. You have a kind of a finite number of pathogens, and so early in life, the thymus creates the antibodies required to deal with those pathogens, and then it fades away. But the thing of it is, we live in a different world now where I might. In fact, I'm going to Africa in just a month. So I'm going to be exposed to a whole new set of different viruses and bacteria, and if my thymus is not intact, then they're far more likely to hurt me seriously. So anyway, so this guy Greg Fahy, he set up an experiment that basically used a bunch of off-patent um, chemicals to regrow the thymus. One of them, the key one, really, everybody knows it works. So-called human growth hormone. It's kind of at the top of the pyramid of hormones, and the problem is, if and bodybuilders use it and so on to get big muscles. But the problem is that it creates when you inject it into yourself. One of the key things it does that's a problem is it will interfere with sugar metabolism and actually make you go into type 2 diabetes. So this is not good. So what Dr. Fahey did was basically give a cocktail where you would inject yourself with the HGH, but you would also take a few other things, uh, metformin and DHEA and magnesium, and you take a couple other things that would mitigate the danger that the HGH introduced, and thus you could regrow not just your thymus but actually other tissue as well without the risk. So it's kind of like taking a poison and an antidote together. Um, Only the poison maybe has some good effect. And I forgot there was a second part to your question. Okay.
Would you? I mean, how would you improve it? But I think that's going to be too.
Oh, I'm not
Yeah,
smart
yeah.
enough to say how to improve it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because one of the things I found about that is when you told me about that, it was quite inspiring for me to use that as a system of you, as you rightly point out. Bodybuilders take steroids, or women take hormone replacement therapy. HRT is not as obviously as damaging, but you have to take 5 times as many hormones in HRT than you do produce naturally internally. So why not reignite the system?
Absolutely.
To produce itself? Is more efficient, it's more effective, it's less damaging to the body.
Yeah, it's more safe because your body, usually it's not just one thing, it's not just one chemical, it's a symphony of chemicals. And if
Yeah.
you just take it's kind of like, say you have a symphony and there's a piano solo and so on. Well, or then maybe it's centered around the piano. But if you have all those other instruments, and if all you do is just play the piano, it won't really be the symphony, will it? You need to have all those, the drums and the oboe and whatever else is going on to make the beautiful music. So, when you just take a single chemical, it often is a little out of balance. It's not integrated kind of a treatment.
Right, and I want to just kind of like jump in real quick. Thymus is an organ that's part of the lymphatic system in which T cells grow and multiply. It is in the chest, behind the breastbone, and also it helps to regulate, I guess, the hormones, including melatonin, neuropeptides, and insulin. It does shrink over time as you get older. You actually shrink. Become a much smaller size, or compared to when you were, a child. And it has an active role in training the immune system to protect the body against infections, even cancer. So
Oh,
that's
well said. Well said.
Yeah.
okay. So we are at the end of this episode. We're at 58 minutes, and I think we have a very productive discussion regarding actually, you know what? I just realized one thing. Could you take 2 minutes, Zach, to answer that question that I asked earlier? Is it possible to reverse aging as well as menopause, and maybe extend a little bit and kind of sum it up for us for this show? Thank you.
Right, absolutely. In the short answer, yes, it is. But menopause and aging are the same thing. Menopause is just one big event that is very clearly defined and as an aging process. We use these techniques to work with rejuvenating ovaries. We can also rejuvenate testes. We can also rejuvenate skin. Hence the concept of fully fit reproductive organs and fully and aesthetic management. So the answer is we can reverse menopause. We can reverse aging.
But not without limit. I think it's important to point out that there's limits on this. I don't think we're going to be reversing any 120-year-old women into pregnancy again.
Right. I see. Sorry. Yes. So the age range we're looking at is between 35 to 70. The oldest person that's approached us was 67, but she decided due to personal reasons she wanted to stop. So the oldest people that we have in the group is now 63. Who has had a child, although she did use a donor egg for the child, but she noticed that our protocols increased her egg quality and size, and so she's thinking about doing having her own children now, which she might do, she might not do. A lot of that though is social as well. Is people say, "Oh, you're too old to do that. You can't do that. You can't do this." People tell you what you can and can't do. Well, that's rubbish, you know. I mean, but there are limits, true, but those limits are going to constantly expand. I think where we're looking at is roughly a maximum lifespan of around about 125 to 130. That's sort of like the sort of telomere Hayflick limit kind of thing, and without going into being able to extend that or anything, let's work at that as your basis. And so we're going to maximize that period and what you can do with it. So wouldn't you like to live to 110 with the physicality of a fit 35 to 40-year-old?
Well, and also regarding age reversal, there's limits on that. Very definitely. Nobody even imagines taking me and turning me back into a suckling baby. That ain't going to happen. Never. Right?
Well, what's the limiting factor? I mean, I can see you being a very cute baby, though, I have to say. Right.
They're all deceptively cute.
Are we talking about physically turning back into a baby? Or are we talking about
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, what I know is like Google founder, Facebook founder, they all want to live forever for a good reason. So we're going to keep exploring this topic. I think we all deserve a longer but also high quality life. So keep coming back, and also please come and visit us at the Johannesburg Afro Longevity International Summit.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. Yeah, just imagine.
And actually, we don't really have to think about living forever, because we really cannot picture what 50 years from now will look like with all the technology that's coming out, you know, the so-called transhumanism and so on. It's really impossible to think about more than 50 years. So, you know, it's just unknowable.
Yeah, just work with what we can work with.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm an optimist, so we're gonna keep thinking. Well, thank you so much.
You're great, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, everybody, if you have more questions, you can see Zach's and Water's full name on the screen. You can find them on LinkedIn, and then just shoot them with questions. And then also please find us www.taffds.org. Join us in Johannesburg this August 23rd to 24th. If you're from North America and Europe, you actually can come to South Africa without a visa. You can just use your passport. So please join us. You have plenty of time. All right. So see you next time. Thank you so much again, Victor and Osioma, Zach and Water.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'll give you some links so people can. I'm not big on LinkedIn. I tend to use YouTube more or that sort of stuff. So I'll give you those links.
All right. We're trying to present. Well, I know that we posted this on our channel on LinkedIn and Facebook, as well as YouTube and Twitter, I believe. So definitely share with us your contact information, and then we'll post it there. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Until next time.
It's been great being with you folks.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.